But everyone told me the entire time, well, no, you can't create new institutions. You got to work within the institutions we have. And that's very radical. That's nice. But, as a young man, it was like, that's not the way. You got to work within and respect the system and blah, blah, blah. And the whole time, my entire life, I was like, this is corrupt. It's like, it's garbage, trash. Yeah. We have to build new things.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to an episode of Moment of Truth. My name is Nick Solheim. I'm the COO of American Moment, and I'm joined by a very special guest today. But first, before we get to that, I'm going to plug all of our things. So if you haven't already, make sure to check out our website, americanmoment.org. There you'll find a whole host of different resources from AmCanon, which is our platform for all of the content that's kind of shaped us intellectually. You'll find different forms for events and different programs and that sort of thing that we have. Our Fellowship for American Statecraft, the interest form for next year is live, so you can feel free to go fill that out. Let us know that you're interested in the fellowship for next year. And there you will also find a whole backlog of this show. This is going to be episode 70 something, and so we'd really encourage you to go back and look at some of the past episodes. If you haven't already, make sure to rate and review the podcast. Please give us 5 stars on any platform that is applicable. Also, a reminder that if you put something interesting in your review or a question that you want to ask us, we'll read it out on the show. I forgot to check before I recorded this, but there's always next week. So today we had a special guest, Matthew Peterson. Matthew Peterson is co-founder of New Founding. He is publisher of Return, a publication and community that brings together all those who want to harness technology for the sake of human flourishing. Peterson is also president of the Firebrand Superpac. Peterson founded The American Mind, a publication of the Claremont Institute, which rapidly became influential among select political, tech, and media figures since its start in 2018. He has 2 decades of experience in digital media, communications, political consulting, and a program evaluation arising from a lifelong dedication to shaping hearts and minds to renew America. He lives in Dallas with his wife and 4 children. We had a very wide-ranging episode today. Anyone who has ever met Matt knows that he's always one for a good conversation. I run into Matt pretty frequently at conferences and events and that sort of thing. We always have a good time hanging out, talking about the future of America. Pretty wide-ranging episode today. Everything from building alternative businesses for people who don't hate America. We also talked about education, how to build alternative media systems, very practical, kind of in-depth episode about how we rebuild American culture. So now we will go to Matthew Peterson. Matt, thanks for coming on the pod.
Hey, great to be here. It's about time. I've been waiting, been dying to get on this pod.
I know. So our listeners will know kind of how we start off right off the bat here. Who are you? Who is Matt Peterson? How did you get where you are today?
I was reading this tweet yesterday about how people should take 5 hours and not even touch grass, just go outside and do nothing.
Yeah.
And think about who they are.
Yeah. So now you're primed and ready.
Well, I read the tweet, but that was on my phone. But it is a good idea to think about. So I guess the way to describe, if it's more how I got here, who am I is a deep question. I think it's an important question, though, because we should be asking what human beings are, by the way. There's a big confusion in our society and disagreement about what we are as human beings. But let's go back to me. I was always sort of on the right, when it comes to politics. I mean, I was born in a trad Protestant household, and I think it's funny how that is what led to my disillusionment a while ago, like 10, 15 years ago, with politics, with the right, etc. And so I kind of had two tracks growing up. One was I was really interested in ideas and literature and philosophy and theology and that kind of stuff from the time I was young. And I was really interested in politics in America. And those two things probably drove me for the first half of my life so far. But I became very disillusioned with politics. So, you're talking about conservative Protestant household, oldest of 6 kids, moved around a bit, and, read a ton, was homeschooled on and off, was very aware of what was going on politically, wanted to do something about it. Issues like abortion were always near and dear to my heart.
And I'm not going to out, I don't want to out you on age, but like roughly what political era are we in at this time?
I was born in the late 70s. Okay. I am a young Gen Xer.
Okay.
Even though there is a certain person who works at American Moment who has sometimes called me a boomer online.
I was working my way up to that.
This is in fact false. Just demonstrable fact. Just we have to lay that out there.
Yeah.
So you're talking born in the late 70s and growing up in the 80s, being in high school and college in the 90s, and I think I graduated. I came out of college in 2001. So that's the time period we're talking. And what I think is interesting is during that time, I mean, I feel like a lot of what these people were saying is the based right. I mean, everything from what you eat and health, that was a thing my parents were doing in the 70s, the health food craze back then, but it was very similar, right? Yeah, the fact that there was an establishment keeping people down, that we needed more activism. The parents were getting together and saying, what's going on with our kids in the 80s? So you kind of I saw all those tensions. And it made me not want to go into politics directly, even though everyone has always told me that that's what I should do. I was much more interested in ideas and sort of longer term, how do we turn things the right way? So what I ended up doing is delving into those ideas as they relate to America and the founding, and going to grad school. Shudder, don't do that. There's no need these days, but I ended up doing that because I just kind of followed the ideas. I was pretty naive about how the world practically works. If I had known, you could do X, Y, and Z, and then you could make this much money, and I wasn't thinking about that. I was very mission driven.
Yeah, they don't want you to know that the books are free. You can just read them anytime.
Yes. Well, I will say that I was. I'm very lucky and thankful for the education I got because I did go to outlying radical schools the entire way.
Okay.
Like my parents were, I remember being 10, 11, 12, like my dad's like, this is the Odyssey. It's a really cool book,
You should read it.
Yeah. Or even better, like you probably can't read this. It's probably above you.
Yeah.
So that education at home was essential. And then I went to Thomas Aquinas College undergrad because I wasn't Catholic at the time, but I wanted to read the books. So, I mean, in a way it was indulgent, but I had a good formation and therefore was going for the right things. And I was able to read, all these great works. I mean, that's all that program is in every subject. And that was, beyond formative. And then I thought, well, what am I going to do next? I probably should go to law school because I should. I want to get into politics, but I don't want to practice law.
Wag your finger at the camera again. Don't do that.
Never go to law school. Abraham Lincoln did not go to law school, right? He was homeschooled. He read Shakespeare, the Bible, and Euclid's Elements and did not go to law school. But I had a good sense not to do that just because I knew too many lawyers, including my father. And they're like, they spoiled me like, no, go study the good stuff. You're interested in ideas. So I thought, okay, so I'll go study philosophy and theology. But even I couldn't take that step when I looked at the programs and what the actual life was. Like, this is a bridge too far. Like, it just is not practical, even if those things are really exciting to me. And so I split the difference, did political philosophy and American government at Claremont, which is, was a decent grad school back then for at least getting into those ideas. And then I realized, and then I thought, well, so another thing, this entire time though, if you know me at all, like I'm not just like a dreamy, philosopher guy. Like I do stuff, and have some facility to do stuff. And I was doing all kinds of interesting things more practically throughout graduate school. Getting into trouble, something would get successful, and I'd say, well, I got to go back to the academy, though. I got to keep studying. As the scripture says, as a dog returns to his vomit, so a fool to his foolishness. So I would go back to the academy because I thought genuinely that if someone with my kind of temperament and personality didn't stay there, then it would just be guys who just kind of are your typical professors. And I wanted to form programs and form people because in a normal society, longer term, that is where you form people. That's where you form the ideas. Everyone can say, oh, no, not me. I don't listen. But the truth is, if you're 18 years old and you're sitting in a class, you were influenced by what the person in authority tells you. And, I saw that our institutions were just terribly corrupt. Later on, I'd spend 3 years evaluating history and civics programs throughout the country. And my conclusion was, we are screwed. We are irreparably screwed.
And what was it back like even then that you were seeing some of this stuff start to creep in?
Oh, I mean, I think it's been it's in the background. It's a gradual process of decline within like big, spurts where it gets really worse. Like the opposite of a plateau moving up. You go down, there's a plateau, go down, go down fast. I think we've been on this trajectory for a long time. I think a lot of the issues we see now aren't new. They're just developed into a worse situation. In education, this all started a long time ago. A lot of the problems we see in society now start post-World War II in the academy. As much as we make fun of the boomers, the big problem they had is so many of them went to college because their parents thought, I want to get my kid to college. And got these young people coming out of the war, they're going to go into college. What made the 60s and 70s radical? It's what they were taught in college, right? There was already rot. What they were being taught was it's those older people who were coaching the hippies and everyone else in the 70s to say 60s and 70s to say what they wanted to say. There's a great interview with Bob Dylan in San Francisco, black and white, and he's like, just smoking and being like a rebellious kid. And all the reporters, if you watch it unedited, are trying to get him to say political things. And he's refusing. In other words, like, it wasn't a bunch of 18-year-olds in the 60s and 70s who came up with these radical ideas. They were formed in those universities that were rotten then. What I saw evaluating those programs, decades later was we're just not teaching people, either we're teaching them some kind of, progressive narrative of decline, America is evil, or we're just not teaching them anything at all. And if you have a population that just doesn't even have the basic knowledge of civics, and you call yourself a republic, that's not going to work. Never mind, you pour in your Howard Zinn or whatever, these popular, basically textbooks to the teachers where it's all deconstructive. Well, actually, so-and-so wasn't a great person, right? Yeah. I mean, that's in everyone's head now. There can be no greatness because actually that person, blah, blah, blah. So that was already there. And I would say just it led to a lot of disillusionment because I would do practical things and projects on the side kind of to make money or get by or just thought they were interesting. And then I thought, well, this great project is ultimately to influence politics and education in the intellectual world. And then you end up saying, well, this is insanely corrupt. But everyone told me the entire time, well, no, you can't create new institutions. You got to work within the institutions we have. And that's very radical. That's nice. But, as a young man, it was like, that's not the way. You got to work within and respect the system and blah, blah, blah. And the whole time, my entire life, I was like, this is corrupt. It's like, it's garbage, trash. Yeah. We have to build new things. But that was the attitude.
And so what kind of happened after you started to go through, like in your career, after you started to go through some of this curriculum, you're finishing up your master's? What happened next? I didn't mean to derail you from your whole career.
Well, I mean, I did a dissertation where, it was about the common good in the American founding before it was cool. Pater Waldstein and I went to the same school and studied the same Thomists. So on the integralist side, which I'm partial to some of, but not all of what they say. But the idea of the common, like, was the founding good was sort of on my mind. So again, it was sort of indulgent, and I was lucky because I was able to just read like thousands of pages of the founding and kind of answer that question for myself. that was an interesting intellectual journey. I mean, I wouldn't say I have all the answers, but I was able to spend time doing that in grad school. So it is actually, if you forget about all the ridiculousness of the degrees and all that, I was able to kind of do that for myself. And then it became time like, well, you're going to publish this book. People wanted me to publish it as a book. Are you going to go on the academic route? You know, I taught and looked around, but I looked around at the scene and just realized this is insane. Like, and also experiencing it, I would never be happy being a professor. It's like being a slave. I mean, you're a serf. Yeah. And actually, the stereotype of the professor who kind of just does nothing and, you know, has this easy life. I mean, they're treated like, I mean, it's actually a terrible life, and a lot of them are busy if you care about teaching, and it's a terrible system. And I saw you can't reform this system unless you were in charge of it, and therefore, you know, in charge of something real at the top, like president or board. And you know, it's ridiculous to do this. Plus, I had already kind of at least reached a plateau in my own intellectual journey. And that's when I started to realize, like, okay, you know, you need to go in a different direction, because this won't work if you're in charge. You're just not going to be happy. That happened. And then what also happened is Trump appeared on the scene. Mm-hmm. And again, before it was cool, I'd given up on the Republican Party. Like, I thought the whole thing was a joke. You know, this wasn't real. They're going to go nowhere. They really have no clue what they're doing. You know, politics was in a morass at the time. You know, you got the Obama years, the Bush years. Post-Bush years, it was just kind of like, this is over. This is over. You stay out of politics. But then Trump appeared. And I was not quick to Trump. I was like skeptical. I liked him, you know, but I was like, this got to be a joke. Like, is he serious? Like, this is kind of awesome because it's funny, you know, but really? And then as that became more serious and I started to realize you have the capacity to do other things, you're not going to get anywhere in academia. Like, you're not going to do the kinds of things you want to accomplish. And the hour is growing late in the Republic. There's things that need doing. That all led to accepting a lunch with Ryan Williams at the Claremont Institute, where I thought I'd never go back, with Ryan saying, hey, just became president, you know, we're looking to make some moves and do some things. And I was convinced that he was, you know, he was like, welcome to the revolution. Those words literally. I was like, okay, let's do this. And then I had a lot of fun. I mean, we created the American Mind. We got in a lot of good kind of trouble. We supported a lot of people behind the scenes with a network of fellows. You know, I ran the educational programs. It was just a real joy. And it was like we were in the fight. And I felt like this is actually, like, we're actually accomplishing something. Mm-hmm. And seeing organizations like American Moment, it's like, this is real. This is happening. We are a part of something that is real. And that was great. I pushed those 4 years, and then I went another step, because then when Trump lost in 2020, I knew, like, the day after the election day, looking at the complete crap show, I was just thinking to myself, okay, I got to go back into some of these other projects in more, let's call it the private sector, and actually push the dial forward in a commercial, cultural way. And that's where I am now.
So where you're at now, new founding, I think a lot of people who are on Twitter see a lot of very interesting people with new founding in their bio doing a lot of really cool things. Explain to our listeners what it is, what you're trying to do, and what specifically you're focused on. Yeah.
So new founding is the brainchild of Nate Fisher, my co-founder, and myself, looking for something outside of, kind of think tanky world, et cetera, thinking we really need to push the dial in a way and bring people together. And in the beginning, it was kind of a venture model, like we're gonna seed the new things that are needed in tech, media, and finance, because we have a political and cultural sense of where we're at, and we realize that we need to find people who are aligned politically, who understand at least that they can't break to the demands of woke capital, and just get a bunch of things going. Mm-hmm. As it developed, I think Nate's vision for a tech platform that brings the trust layer back to the internet, and his thoughts over the last few years about credit, trust, how these things need to be restored, developed even further. So what new founding is now, and you'll see more of in the future, will be that tech platform or network that ultimately is open protocol, but is bringing people together in a way so humans control the network. There's governance of the network that's public, that you see in a classic American way, and it allows people to congregate in in an organized fashion and basically like curate and credential things based on human judgment, not algorithms made by people who hate you. But as part of that, we need to gather people in some key strategic ways. So return.life is it's focused on restoring the human in the age of tech. That content will expand, but return.life is a publication now. And Return is really about the human in the midst of the digital age. And it's a community where people are getting together who want to invest or who want to found new things in that space, who understand something about human nature and want to go in a different direction than the wokeness. That's key for a lot of reasons to what we're doing. And then underneath that, more broadly, is Align, which is how do we start fostering an economy within an economy? Let's provide people practically with alternatives. Right now, Align is sort of it's sort of marketing in a way for businesses across the country that want to say, hey, I'm not woke, at least I'm pro-America, and they're just normal businesses. It's not like, draped in the American flag with gun girls on each side. We just need real alternatives for real products and services. So Align is more, it's more bringing those people together, both the businesses and the audience that wants these products and services. And then underneath all of that is the tech platform that I started with. So that's the vision of what we're doing. You have Return, people getting together, founders, entrepreneurs, investors. It is more tech focused though, and about human life there. The content on there will become, as it goes, more about these broad issues, also about trends that are going on, where you see people like making dating apps that won't be like Tinder, right? That kind of stuff. And then you got Align, which is more like bring the businesses together with the people. And then underneath it, you got this developing platform that will restore trust and human judgment to digital life. That is, in a nutshell, like new founding. The nutshell is big.
Yeah.
The vision is big. But I would say also practically, we've spun out some things already, right? So we spun out a new nonprofit called Courage is a Habit. It's one of our employees that's doing incredible work for activists and parents at the school level. He is an activist, not a fundraiser, not a DC type. He's just a guy who has experience in fighting the schools. He's providing parents with weapons to go after the schools. Courage is a Habit is great. We spun that out this year. We also have a great media team, and we started doing some interesting things in politics with a super PAC, American Firebrand, and these there's so much energy. I guess is what I'm saying. That's why all these people are there, and people, what are you guys doing? There's a lot of things going on. And partly it's the organizational problem we face is that everything needs to be done. And also everyone good wants to do everything,
Yeah.
And so it's like you become this hub of activity and people want to come in. And to some extent, my job is trying to figure out how do I efficiently gather in talented people who want to do things and then funnel them out to other people who are going to put them in place so that we can move the ball forward.
Yeah, I think we get similar comments pretty frequently. Like, wait a minute, you're doing what now? You're hosting that event or you're doing that program? It's like, and I think people can be very surprised when you get a few, because I know you guys are relatively small as well. When you get a few highly motivated people together, I mean, it is just about anything is possible if everyone's willing to, pour their essence into it, right? I think I do also want to plug the Align newsletter. It is awesome. It is one of my favorite newsletters. It's where I pick most of my gifts for other people for birthdays, Christmas, that sort of thing. And so I'm a big fan of it. If you haven't already, you should go sign up for that. I do want to ask, how do you get plugged in with these companies, these folks that are starting businesses who are who maybe have not been super politically active for a long time, but they know that they hate this woke stuff, they hate anti-Americanism,
right?
Just practically, how do you find these people?
Well, there's two levels to that, and they're pretty clear in my mind. One is just generally for Align. When we started thinking about what was needed, I thought, well, let's start with a newsletter. Let's bring in and let's give it a positive vibe. It shouldn't be anti. The rule that I had for the newsletter from the beginning was for the writers, if you mention a negative thing, like, PayPal canceling people or whatever, you can only do it just to bring it up, to turn around with a positive. Because we want to talk about an aspirational like way of life. I mean, lifestyle. Lifestyle is kind of a fake and performative word because you can't style your life. You know, it's like a boomer word, but you get what I mean. It's like a way of life stuff. So we want something that's more practical that prevents the alternatives. Now, we had a couple of lists in the beginning of businesses. People from the Trump administration had a list of like American-made stuff, and obviously they looked for it not being woke from some stuff that they had done. I had some other lists, but for Align generally, it was more like, let's just pool our resources. And when we see these companies or we know of these companies, let's start compiling them. I mean, that's how simple it was. And then once you start doing that, people start coming and saying, hey, can you put me in this newsletter? Can you put me on this list? And then we developed a kind of quick and dirty process for, vetting them ourselves. And I think the key is, in the beginning, people get obsessed in our society with the metrics and a formula. And, I thought about, getting large data sets. How could we figure this out, with some of the people who do that behind the scenes? We still could move in that direction to get, large chunks. But what we did was organic. We just started to put together the list. We developed a process by which we had people look, make sure they hadn't said anything woke. And then we encourage people, if you find out, this business isn't on here, let us know. And because we were loose about it, where not everything is going to be made in America, sadly, that's just not reality. But people understand that as long as you're upfront about it, right? You say, we highlight if this is made in America or these parts are made in America, we can talk about that. We're going to favor those companies the more that's the case. But also we're going to be like, not every, it's not the case all the time, sadly. So by being somewhat, somewhat loose, but also organic about it, and just doing due diligence and actually starting to vet them, we developed that newsletter and that rhetoric that is appropriate for it. That really is practical, but it kind of like elevates you, And that was the beginning. So after that, when the ball's rolling now, you have businesses coming to you, because those smaller or medium-sized businesses that can move products direct to consumer, there's a ton of them that they're safe in red state America. Like they want to plant a flag, but Align's flag isn't like cheesy, rah, grifting conservatism. It's more like an elevated lifestyle deal. So we got a men's and women's newsletter now, and it's growing very fast. There's hundreds of thousands of people receiving this, and it will scale up very quickly after we hit some benchmarks to even more.
The American Man is the men's one?
Yeah, we had an American Man, American Woman, but I think it's just verticals now of Align.
Okay.
So it's like Align men's, Aligns women.
Yep. Very
interesting newsletters. They're actually good writers, thinking about it. It's not just some spam email with a bunch of stuff. So anyway, that's the organic way. Real quick on the more elite level, informally, this is already happening. Like, all the people that say are friends and fellow travelers, especially in technology, but even in other areas, these are people who are like looking for money. I mean, the founders, on the founders, entrepreneurs side. So they're hungry and they're already scouring the landscape. And I almost got sick of this dynamic where I would meet investors as well. There's not as many, of course, investors as there are people looking for money.
For sure.
But investors as well would say, hey, multiple, people, like, can you connect me to, I want to invest in this stuff. And anyone who's aligned is thinking the same thing. I need a lot of people who are aligned, because not all of them I'm going to invest in, very few of them, but I need many of them as possible, because I see what's happening in the country. And there's actually, there's a whole secret, based finance community that realizes how bad things are and is looking for this. And so putting those pieces together is more of elite activity, but it's also something where we already know some people on both sides, and it's just time to put the pieces together.
Yeah. And you were mentioning in your introduction, talking about kind of bringing a lot of these, political ideas and philosophies, bringing them to bear in public life. How does creating these kinds of networks of small businesses and investors and that sort of thing, what's the 10 to 20 year plan? How is this going to change American culture and society?
Yeah, so this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I think that the only way to fly, the only way to win, is to have a broad-based commercial cultural movement that you recognize its signs and symbols. You recognize, like, you know it when you see it, kind of thing, just like ESG or social justice. It's a comprehensive moral view, moral vision of a way of life, of where America should go, that I believe firmly that half plus of the country is interested in. And no telling how that would break. At least 40% is interested in it of the nation. And that is one of the greatest GDPs in the world. And so I don't buy this whole thing, we're going to go back to normal or we're going to go back to neutral. There's no neutrality. Like the country is dividing. And the only way to save it or to bring it back together is to take billions of dollars out from under the grasp of woke capital. And the only way to do that is, you should fight from the top down. You should fight from DC. You should fight them in the law. You should fight them in the regulations. Absolutely. But the real way to draw blood is to withdraw that money, right? To take the money out from them and start putting it somewhere else. And people want to take their money out of that 401k that's actually part of a fund that's telling Disney they have to be woke and going against their values. They want that. But I think what's needed is a larger movement that you would see in media where we're not atomized and we're actually showing people like just living their lives in a decent way in the 21st century with technology that we have. I mean, it's pro-tech, but it's pro-using tech for us to be more human. And that vision is what will draw people towards it, and it will allow us to win. Because all of a sudden, politically, what happens if you have that? Well, it's not like low status for, to be on this side. I mean, there's money, honor, glory, praise, shame, blame in an entirely different culture within a culture, an economy within an economy. That'll get a lot of people on the Republican side politically just move the right way. Like even the guys who do this all the time, like which is most politicians, they'll go the right way if they know like this is a thing. It is a movement that they're part of. It's a culture they're part of where they'll be rewarded on, our own shows on video, right? Our own shows on audio. Now, our own ecosystem, but you got to build that up in a way that is real, that's tied to an actual way of life. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm about. I think providing that comprehensive moral vision that is a way of life that we can attain here and now for ourselves and our posterity, an American way of life in the 21st century that is worthy of the name, that's an alternative to what's being forced upon us. To me, that's the only way to fly. That's what we have to do.
Yeah. So paint a picture for me and for the listeners of what that broader conservative ecosystem looks like. You've mentioned media, education, business. What are the kinds of systems that conservative, not just organizations, but individuals or even people that live in red America should be building?
Yeah. So, I mean, let's just walk through. Let's imagine, this future existing, 20, 30 years from now. You're in a red state, and Texas and Florida are where people send men to space. They're not second-class states. They're the places where innovation actually happens. This is already the case. And you go to a public university in Texas or Florida, and it has some of the best researchers in the world from various sectors who have been persecuted because of the wokeness elsewhere, and they've congregated at this university. There's no hint of any of the garbage in the university because that has been purged. Those people are all gone. That system has been reborn, and that public university system is a place that respects, and understands the best practices of human life that actually make us happy. It's rejected the idiotic premises of modern social science. It's full of people actively then free to research and develop technology, et cetera, that's pro-human, not anti-human, that's pro-American, not anti-American, that has a research apparatus that's trying to bring back every part of the supply chain to this country, and that's a huge part of it, right? I mean, imagine a university like that, that actually, was not only like, oh, we respect all whatever here. It actually was no. There's a certain way of life, broadly speaking, that was been understood for a long time that we need to go back to, and we're doing research based on those premises of what the human being is. Imagine if that actually existed. That would be a game changer for the entire world. Why can't we do that in a red state? And then if I start walking around, what if I see, architecture projects all over the place that are actually beautiful, that show some kind of bold vision of what humanity should be, that symbolize the strength, vitality of civilization that's healthy and strong, that we actually want. Why couldn't that be? When I turn on the TV, why don't I see ads for all kinds of products that are based upon the natural human desire to have, maintain, and raise a family? Where that's, you can't sell products and services with that, but you can sell it with climate change. What about the family crisis? It's the basis of our civilization. Why don't you have a media where you're actually selling products and services on the basis of a healthy family? When you turn on the TV, why don't you see that? Why don't you see all the alternative media that we know should exist, that just isn't even allowed to be right now? You can't even see it. I mean, God forbid you saw one show, like the reality show that I want to make tomorrow. Contact me if you're interested, which is Blue State to Red State House Hunters. Will this California couple choose the country in Idaho, the city in Dallas? That's the most obvious thing in the world. Why? Because everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
Why is it radical? Why do I have that opportunity to make something so successful that no one else is making? Because they're not going to show you why people are moving. They're not going to let them say it on camera. Yeah. And they're not gonna ask the neighbors, how do you feel about all these Californians moving here? Like, really? Tell me, Yeah. I mean, why would that be interesting? It'd be interesting because people are interested right now in a different way of life because their way of life sucks and they see it being oppressed. So when you think about what that would look like, I think a work from home and technology allows different ways of organizing people in different kinds of communities. We should be rethinking how we build cities and towns in places like Texas, where there's lots of space. There's a lot of experimentation that could take place that people aren't even they haven't even thought of, and the energy for what I'm talking about would be amazing. Right. I mean, there would be none of this oppression that everyone doesn't even realize they're loaded under. They would be free to be more human.
Yeah.
Does that help at all?
Yeah, for sure. And you bring up education, and I want to dive a little deeper into that because I think it's something that a lot of parents are really struggling with right now. A lot of them are waging these battles at school board meetings, and a lot of them are wondering, like, do I pull my kids out? I mean, what would your advice be to parents with young children who, have the option to send them to public school and are kind of wondering about what the alternatives are or what the alternative should be?
Right. Well, ultimately, I mean, I have no problem, of course, with public schooling. It's a wonderful idea. Sadly, right now, as much as I know all the objections, it pains me to say it, my strong bias would be do not send your kids to public school if at all possible. And I get, it's hard to do. Not everyone can do it for a variety of reasons, but you should be strongly biased against that system simply because no matter where you are, you can be in the reddest of red states. That system has been corrupted from within. It is a national system in many ways, and all the national associations, are corrupt. So as Courage is a Habit, my buddy Alvin running that, I mean, will tell you, he went to the Counselors Association. I mean, I don't want to make light of it, but it's almost like they exist to groom kids. I mean, they have forgotten any sense of mission. They're all about SEL, CRT, all these acronyms that represent horrible things. And so you cannot trust, by default, you cannot trust that system. If you're talking about even, say, Catholic schools, like you shouldn't trust that system either. They've been corrupted for a long time. So, it's a good Catholic school. Like, it's a bunch of rich kids they've gone woke as well in the school many times. Not all the time, and not all the time in public schools. But that should be your default. In other words, you should be looking for bright spots where there's signs that the institution itself understands what learning is and will avoid all this madness. And what I will say is that is where there's a lot of hope. One of the things we want to do with the platform is make it easy for people to just have user-generated ratings and rankings for all this stuff, because that's what people want. It's very valuable, but you can't get it if you're on a platform with people who aren't aligned.
Yeah.
So a couple of bright spots would be there are these charter schools now, like Great Hearts Academies is one. They're growing. They're classical. They're very good. They're public. You can send your kids there if they exist in your state. You don't have to pay anything, right? And they're good. I mean, they're on the ball. They avoid all this stuff, and they're really interested in actually learning. There's also Hillsdale's charter school program. I mean, those schools also, they're public, they're everywhere, and they're growing. They're very, very good. And then you see this renaissance, a small renaissance all over the place where people are going back to classical learning. And when they say that, usually that means they're not going to do a bunch of the crazy stuff.
Yeah.
They're actually concerned with learning itself. And if the word classical or great book scares you, I would say it shouldn't. You can do all the other stuff, but it shouldn't scare you. It's actually a way of, and everyone can do it. It's a way of learning that, especially K through 12, is, I think, very valuable route to go. There's a reason that people who are going against the wokeness are doing that. So there are these efforts, and if they're not in your area, you still have options. I mean, homeschooling is a real option, and homeschooling doesn't mean like you're just alone. You can easily find these co-ops or band together with other people for, with tutors and whatnot. You'd be surprised at how you can make it work. And then at the end of the day, if you're absolutely stuck, then you're going to have to do the work for your kid and ask serious questions of that public school. And in many places, there still is a fight, for the school board, et cetera. And if that's the case, then you got to, and there is a fight left, and you want to battle. You got to do the work, and you got to look for organizations that are going to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So moving up, one level of authority now to a lot of these parents who have started to run for school boards and county supervisor and that sort of thing. As they're thinking about schools, and maybe they're in a red city, in a red state, you're talking about 20 to 30 years from now,
right.
These red states have public universities that are studying based on these foundational principles. How can the people that are on school boards, that are involved in public school, that are involved on a local and state level, start to build that kind of infrastructure in red cities and red states?
Yeah, so that's really important. I think you have to know when there is a fight possible and it's worth fighting, and then once you've decided that it is worth the fight, you got to go all in. Now, obviously, mileage may vary depending on the time or the ability that you have. But what I mean by going all in is you should be banding together with people who will help create a larger infrastructure that supports your efforts. That's a mouthful. Say it shorter. Like, find other people who will help you.
Yeah.
And that includes, and rethink the way in which the schools work now. So in other words, if you have a library that's full of a bunch of, child pornography, basically, which is most of them, and a bunch of weird stuff, and you have a librarian that won't get rid of it, like, get rid of the librarian.
Yeah. And then get rid of the books.
Yeah. If the city council tells you, for instance, in your city that, oh no, the city library has to have a librarian from the Librarian Association, like, the association is messed up. You should just assume that, because it is. In this case, like, you can go on their website and they'll tell you, if your parents are upset reading trans stuff, just insert different pronouns in regular books. I mean, they say that on their website, right? So I don't know why people don't assume it's corrupt after all these decades, but it's corrupt. But then you have to rethink. You have to really be a founder. You have to think, how do we do this in a way that just eschews the system? Like, screw what they're telling me. We're going to find someone who's actually a good librarian, who wants, classic good books for kids and cares about it, and, can do these other things we need. Let's find that person. And if there's a problem or an obstacle with law and regulation, you're going to be like, okay, well, how do I change that? Who do I call? Because guess what? Increasingly, there's going to be people in the state legislature who are going to be like, what? They do what? Change the law. That's how they got here. That's how we have to think. And that means, well, then we'd have to fire everyone on the state board of it.
Great. Let's do it.
Like, the only way out is through. That's my line. Like, you got to do this. You just got to figure out what is needed. And what I would say is, don't be scared about it, because if you're willing to fight, there are now people who will help you do it. But you got to be a pioneer if you're going to go into that system, and you have to not accept their premises about how it should work.
Yeah. I want to also talk about media, because this is something that you and a lot of the folks that you guys have on staff are very, very good at. You guys put out a lot of great content. I know a lot of our listeners are on the newsletters. They listen to your podcast. They listen to This Is Your Country. You know, they listen to all these things. But I want to talk about the media landscape. I think it's a bit more of a challenge than education, in the fact that it's a lot of our infrastructure now is like literally somebody else's platform. You know, you want to send emails to people. Oh, the people who literally own email, like all the email companies, you know.
Don't I know it?
Yeah, we're not going to let you say that. We're not going to let you do this. You know, you end up same thing with a lot of these banks, you know, payment processors, that sort of thing. Oh, you said this on TV? Well, we're gonna kick you off. So as we kind of talk about, you know, building a media infrastructure that's more friendly to the average American, to, you know, what the average American cares about, how do you get around some of those obstacles of, you know, what you're allowed to say on TV, online, etc.?
That has been something that I've really thought about and wrestled with my entire life.
Build your own social media company, Matt. Come on.
Well, I mean, there's the first response to build your own Google, which is, okay, I'll get a DARPA grant and find 2 really smart Stanford kids, you know, and because that's how Google's. But anyway, but the second response now is kind of like, okay,
yeah, like I'll do it. Like, sounds good.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do this. That's fine. And if you can't build, you know, you're not gonna be able to build PayPal overnight. But a lot of these things, the model's established, and you can have something serviceable. It won't be as good in the beginning. It's not going to be, but you can have something serviceable. If it's not a grift and people are genuinely trying to build something, I think there's enormous opportunity to just build the alternative. And that's what we have to do. And that's what I'm encouraging people to do and facilitating, catalyzing behind the scenes. With media, though, near and dear to my heart, and my frustration in that world over the course of decades and doing all kinds of crazy, insane things in media behind scenes, but the biggest problem to me is what you touched on, which is that the platform, or even whoever at the end of the day is in charge of content, a lot of times either doesn't get it or is actively hostile to half the country. And it's very similar to the problem I mentioned in education. You know, you can go and be like a good professor or whatever. Maybe you can have a show, or you can be an actor or an actress and work within the system. But we're now at a point where, what's the point? Like, what's the point of that when the system is increasingly dialing it in, drilling down, and purging anyone in its ranks who doesn't bow down to this doctrine, which is ruining both education and ruining media content, whether you're talking about news or whether you're talking about movies. And so there's no way around new entities or radically reformed entities that generate revenue with people at the top who understand the moment and what's going on. You know, and there's no way around that. And the problem is that the excuse will be like, well, we need someone with experience of, you know, and the only people with experience are the people who, you know, who caused the problem in the first place, who don't understand the problem at all. And that is the excuse. It's always the excuse. Like, well, we need a resume that has blah, blah, blah. Like, yes, you need competent people, but a lot of this is often just camouflage for, don't make me change, everything's fine. And when you think about what could be done, I think what is going to be done, when you think about what I am going to do in the next 5 to 10 years, the sky is the limit for media. I mean, they have, it's like my friend Amanda Milius likes to say, like they've just left the money on the table. They really have. Now, the challenge here is really hard because you are going to have to, I mean, this is not an easy business. It's not an easy thing to get into. It's not easy to do right. But what I see is, you get talented younger people who understand the landscape of freaking reality as it is. And then whether you're talking about politics, or I think the same would apply in something where you're telling stories, they're going to do stuff that's good. Now you got to figure out how to monetize that and keep it going. You're going to need people at the top who get it. But the fundamental reality is you need those people at the top. If you don't have a board, you don't have C-suite people who understand what's going on and are willing to take these swings, then we can't build what we need.
Yeah, I think one of the things too that's been most difficult about creating an alternative platform is that basically all the people who have tried to do it have been going up against literal monopolies, you know? So to take Rumble as an example, right? Like YouTube is the video that's what everyone said, you know, it becomes a verb in the same way that Google has, right? And so I think it's been it's an uphill battle that normal business owners don't normally have to start with. You don't have to start pointing your finger up at the guy and saying, I'm coming for you, you know? So what are the people or the companies or the organizations that are doing that right now that you feel in the next 5 to 10 years, you're like, oh yeah, that's gonna succeed. That's gonna change the game.
Yeah, well, I want to avoid the stock tip in a favoritism game, but I think what you're saying, I put it this way: there's certainly a number of efforts that see the next version of the internet, basically like, you know, blockchain friendly, crypto friendly, crowdsource, whatever. There's a number of efforts that see that as the route to the future for the next platform. Something like that is undoubtedly true. But it's not clear how that shakes out or who is able to build on that next. In other words, I think my strong suspicion here is that right now, you can build, like Rumble is a good example. You can build an alternative YouTube, and if you have some competence and some backing by people who understand the need for it, you know, it will survive and in fact might be able to do some amazing things. But ultimately, to get ahead of these monopolies, I think it's the next wave of technology where we need to dominate. In other words, when we move to blockchain, crypto, that space, when we move to a new internet that's less controllable, God willing, that's where all of a sudden we'll build the companies that will be, you know, looking in a different direction. That's where the race is. So right now, I'm fully in support of Rumble and what you know, was Chris Pavlovsky and those guys are doing. It's incredible. But maybe they'll also develop with, you know, the new stuff, but that's the dynamic I see playing out.
Yeah. And I never really wanted to fall into the criticism. I think you're hitting on something very important. I think it's really easy to start to criticize some of these people like, oh, you know, why don't you just build your own thing that's not trying to copy someone else? Right. I think that's punching right and that's dumb. Like we should encourage people on our side who want to be building good things. But this was the question I was kind of trying to get to is like, how do you do that organically? Now, as you've said with Google, right, a DARPA grant and you know, two like extremely brilliant individuals. But yeah, like say a little more about like how organically we can, you know, kind of encourage people on our side doing that sort of thing.
Well, one of the problems is that when it's too, a lot of it's just frankly too grifty, right? Yeah. In the beginning, you're going to find people who realize they can raise money by saying this is a right-leaning X, you know, the right-leaning, the conservative version of X.
We won't name drop anybody or any product.
Yeah,
but
no. Well, let's just say that there are out there people who will plant that flag, and they know they're going to get some kind of attention because of the demand. And I see the problem now is, and for me, this is just, I mean, facilitating and networking. You know, I'm not the founder of these companies or whatever, but I'm looking at it sort of structurally, politically. How do I foster a movement culturally? And, you know, you need to encourage people who are competent to build these alternatives that maybe aren't going to be billion-dollar companies, but they still could be very lucrative companies. Because people just need one. I mean, an example would be like Shopify. Shopify has tried to stay out of a lot of these debates, but it still has, you know, canceled some people, et cetera. An alternative to that you're not going to be as good as that company, right? I mean, it's already built up. It's already have brilliant people, a lot of talent. But if you can do conservative version of X at a certain level of competency, which increasingly you can, because people who do build these things and are talented want to come out, then that can be good. That'll help immensely. We need a whole movement like that. But then beyond that, you need like the real creatives, or the people who are kind of visionary, looking for the new stuff, so that as things move forward, you are like our side leads. And what I would say is what's lacking in a lot of people's understanding of all this is, including the smarties, who think they know everything on all the sides, is you don't do this at scale organically without a kind of vision of a commercial cultural movement. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't think that, where's the articles and profiles on the founders who are making the dating apps that are moving in a different direction than Tinder on purpose because they see human nature is not being served well, and we actually need marriage and family, and we need technology to encourage it. That's like a movement now. These people exist. They're trying to create new things. Maybe they succeed, maybe they don't. I don't know. But we need to highlight that trend to investors. That's what I want to do. I'm going to show you. I'll show you these guys. And we need to then get people excited who are, building, to know that they'll be respected, they'll be highlighted, and we'll praise them. We'll give them rewards, right, for doing the right thing. And it's kind of it doesn't work intellectually even, although you need people thinking about it intellectually. It works as you know it when you see it, just like with the social justice crap, right?
Yep.
All their different, they have all kinds of, this entire ethical system. We need our own, right? We have our own already, and we have people who are trying to do it. It needs to be highlighted as a movement people can join, and people are already part of. And so you actually do that to no small degree with media of the right kinds.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's one of the things that you start to see, like you mentioned, the dating apps, the more conservative dating apps as an example. Like, it seems already all the stories that are coming out in the legacy news media, they're like, quick, let's kick that thing. We don't want that to succeed. Like, you have yet to see a positive story, highlighting those people and the sort of thing that they're trying to build. Matt, where can people find you, keep up with all the things that you're doing? This is the time to plug all your stuff.
Oh gosh, I have too many things to plug these days, but the simplest thing would be to go to Twitter, at DocMJP, DOCMJP. On Twitter. Newfounding.com is up and running. There'll be a new version of that soon. But if you go to Newfounding, you can sign up for our stuff and see a lot of it. I'd be remiss if I didn't plug American Firebrand, the Super PAC, making some of the more interesting videos on the internet these days. That's on Twitter as well at Firebrand PAC. And I can probably end there. I mean, I should say the podcast.
Yeah.
Against my better judgment, I've been twisted. My arm has been twisted into doing this podcast. So I have my own Matthew Peterson show, and you should check that out. It's on Apple and Spotify, and it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more positive than a lot of what's out there. I talk about this kind of stuff we're talking about here, and also some deeper issues. Like, I try to make it so it's not responding to the news cycle, and gets you out of the black pill mindset. And in the midst of all this, I have to say, the fun part about it is I know there are people out there who are, of stature, saying this is crazy, like this can't exist, this new culture, new economy, it never existed, it won't work. What are you even talking about? And that's because they can't even imagine some of the things that we're going to do. And that's what gets me up in the morning.
Good. Awesome. Well, hey, thanks for coming on the show and for selling your vision. Yeah,
thanks for having me. It's great to be here at American Moment. Love you guys.
Thank you.
Do you want to get more involved with American Moment? Do you want to get off the couch and stop just watching a podcast about the issues you care about? Then you need to go to americanmoment.org/join. If you fill that form out, one of our team members will meet with you and we'll discuss how best to get you involved in politics and public policy here in DC. Maybe that involves you coming and working at a think tank or a congressional office. Maybe you're in business and it means just holding on for a few years until we get the next presidential administration. Maybe you're a very wealthy person who wants to give us a bunch of money. Either way, go to americanmoment.org/join to meet with a member of our team and get involved more substantively in trying to save this country. It's not enough to listen to podcasts. You actually have to do something.
Well, I told you that was going to be a very in-depth conversation on a lot of different issues facing Americans today. If you haven't already, as I said in the beginning, make sure to rate and review the podcast. Give us 5 stars. Write an interesting review that tells us how great we are. And we will see you next week.
Moment of Truth is an American Moment Studios production filmed at the Conservative Partnership Center. Our podcast is produced and edited by Jake Mercier and Jared Cummings. Our intro music is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich. Don't forget to like and subscribe on all platforms, and you can go to AmericanMoment.org to learn more.